Welcome to Peacebuilding Initiatives, where we explore the transformative power of dialogue, cross-cultural understanding, and collective empathy in building more peaceful and connected communities. I'm your host, José Barzola. Thank you for joining us. On today's episode, we're diving into peace and conflict education. How do peace and conflict education practitioners within higher education, colleges, universities, address structural violence beyond interpersonal conflict? Our guest is Samaria Vital, a student athlete at the University of Hawaiʻi at Mānoa for the past 4 years. Samaria has earned a bachelor's degree in political science and is currently pursuing a graduate certificate in conflict resolution at the Matsunaga Institute for Peace. In this conversation, we'll explore how peace and conflict education practitioners in higher education address structural violence, inequality, institutional bias, rather than focusing solely on interpersonal conflict. This work shifts attention to the broader social, political, and economic systems that perpetuate harm. Drawing on case studies and analytical research grounded in Johan Galtung's theory of structural violence, Samaria will highlight how these dynamics are deeply embedded in everyday life. Really looking forward to diving deep into this conversation. So, Samaria, thank you so much for being here today. It's really great to have you here and to go on this journey together and learn. Really, I'm here to learn. So to get us started first, and opening up in your personal journey, can you start by sharing a bit about your own journey, what brought you to the University of Hawaiʻi and into this peace and conflict education space?
Yes, of course. Thank you for having me on this podcast. So what brought me to Hawaii, I would say, is I just really wanted to I'm from Texas, so that's born and raised, just from the South and everything. And whenever I was looking for schools and stuff like that, I got a few offers from schools, and I mainly came for athletics. I'm on the track and field team. But I got a little message from Hawaii one day. I was like, you know what? Let's go see what it's about. And I went to on a visit, on a little college visit, toured the campus, and I'm like, wow. I'm like, this place is great. And it's the culture, it's the stories, it's very different than from where I'm from. And I know one thing I wanted to learn, especially in these I've say developmental years of 18 to 22 and stuff like that, was developing more of a patience, more understanding life. Because I feel whenever we're growing up, my life is very fast paced. And Hawaii to me is not slow, but it's very much you need to understand why you're doing this and understand the story behind it. And I felt that very much so in Hawaii, even everything from the Kona lows that are happening right now to the stories about Mānoa and stuff like that. And I really like that. And I was okay, I think this place can teach me more than just my education. I think it can teach me more about understanding my culture, identifying better with my culture and things like that. And so I think that's one thing that drew me to Hawaii. Of course, track and field drew me to Hawaii, but a lot of the people that I met while I was on this visit, I'm like, I need to know these people. I want to get to know these people. I feel they've had a really big impact on my life, on how I treat others, how I even treated myself even more, and things like that. I just think Hawaii most definitely has changed me for the better, and I can't wait to keep going.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And you touched upon being a student athlete a little bit, but how have your experiences as a student athlete in sports shaped the way you understand conflict and teamwork? I presume you've been not just what age did you start getting into track and field?
I actually got into track and field very late. I didn't really take it seriously until my senior year of high school. I remember vividly remember 8th grade. I was leaving school, and I was oh, and my basketball coach at the time, because I was basketball and volleyball player all my life. And then my basketball coach was hey, I'm gonna see you at track practice. And I told her, no, I don't run. I don't run. I'm good. She's no, you're gonna throw. I was oh, I don't do that either. She's either I see you at practice or I see you tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. Meaning I was gonna have to run. And I was oh, okay. Called my mom, hey mom, my coach wants me to do track practice. Can you pick me up at 5? And she's yeah, that's fine. I think I did track. I did the field events for all of 8th grade, which is four track meets. It's not that much. And I didn't really pick it up again until my junior year, but COVID hit. So one meet, and then basically COVID was hit, and then I was done with track. Mm-hmm. And my senior year, I was okay, I want to go to college. I've always wanted education. I'm I want to go to college, but I don't want to pay. So I was let's put all of our chips into this throwing thing. I talked to my my club coach at the time. I'm hey, I want to take this seriously. He was all right, let's do it. And we got some numbers out there, and now I'm in Hawaii, and it's great. But I would say as a student athlete, it's just it's taught me a lot about least like to start with the conflict part is most definitely a lot of like my team is full of girls. So like there's a lot of like butting heads and stuff like that. But you just need to like I have to remember a lot of these girls are coming here and they're trying to find their voice. So like a lot of them probably came from like yeah, like like being the youngest in the household or maybe being the oldest in the household or like they just didn't really convey what they were talking about whenever they were younger, stuff like that. And so it's a lot of like they're coming at me and they're like very emotional. They're mad about how they did in the meet, or they're mad about like, oh, coach said something to me, or hey, this girl's doing good, but I'm doing bad. Like, why? Why is this happening? And it's a lot of like, I learned, I'm like, okay, do not react to them the same way that they're coming to me. Just have like a calm voice. They're not mad at me, they're mad at something else. And especially with the courses I'm taking this semester, it's very much helped me understand that they're not it's not anything has nothing to do with me. It has something to do with what built up into this like show of anger or the show of emotion and stuff like that. I've really like learned and I really appreciate that I have learned that. And whenever it comes to being a student athlete, like you need to be able to be in the moment, understand like, hey, I have no control over what's about to happen other than what I can do. And even this past weekend, I was at a track meet, and I was just not doing well. Like the throws were not going well at all. But I was just like, all right. And like I get one throw in, my coach is like, hey, this is not. She's like, hey, this might not be your meet. She's like, but this is gonna show how you compete. Like this is gonna like you need to compete right now. This is how you're gonna this is gonna help you mentally. And a lot of things I think have just been more of a mental challenge, and I think that's stuff that I needed to grow and to be better. And as a student athlete, like it's mainly mental challenges. Yes, like the physical, but I can get through the physical anytime. I think every student athlete needs to remember that like the mental challenge is what's going to be the hardest part. And I think that's what being a student athlete has helped me a lot with, especially with being in school and everything. It's like I could always like be like I'm like, oh my God, I have so much work to do. It's like, all right, you chose this life. Like let's get it done. Communicate. I think communication most definitely helped. I think communication got me to this podcast, which is great. Can't wait to be on this. But I think just learning is most definitely teaches you like, hey, you need to like take things seriously and just understand what's going on.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. So what I heard earlier on though is so your basketball and was it volleyball? Is that what it was?
Yeah, yeah. That was like my main sports.
And all I could think about as you were like sharing the story, I was like, basketball. March Madness just ended, and I all I could think about was like, there's a lot of running, there's a lot of throwing going on, so I could
Yes,
see the transferable skills of like track and field, and I'm glad that coach saw that as well.
me
So
too. I would have
it's
never thought about throwing if it wasn't for her.
basketball was just something you just had been doing for a while, I presume, and
Yeah.
so you just okay, yeah. Yeah. I gotta say, in the neighborhood, really with friends, you play basketball or like rarely are people like, let's do track and field. Let's go see how far we can throw this. That's wonderful. I'm glad. I'm glad. And I love to hear about how, yeah. So the open lines of communication, but just understanding also what I'm hearing is that once more that what I always hear, and I sometimes have to remind myself and others, we are our own worst critic.
Yes.
And so just being a little kinder to ourselves and finding ways to kind of manage, especially in this competitive environment that you're in and you're constantly being compared, whether they may say or not, there's always someone creating statistics about something.
Yeah.
As you reach different milestones. Was there any specific moment or experience that sparked your interest in this field of conflict resolution, conflict studies?
Um. Yes, I would say just because I would actually honestly think it's being out here. I never back home, like yes, my friend group is very diverse and like I have friends from like other like just other cities and other states. But being here is like having international friends and like understanding how different the world really is. Cause I feel like my thing is being from Texas, the only thing like Texas just loves Texas. So like you don't really learn anything else other than like Texas. Texas is great. Texas is amazing. That's it. So like I come here and I have friends from Australia, I have friends from New Zealand, and I just like the way that I see how they approach things because in my head, I'm very much okay, this happens, this one, two, three, and also this, that, and the third is going to happen after this. But my friend, one of my other friends, she's like, how do you think like that? She's like, I'd never thought like that. And she's from Australia. She's like, she thinks completely different from me. But I love speaking with her because it's like, okay, like I don't really need to like, oh, I don't always have to think to the future. Like, yes, it's helpful, but it's like the way that she goes about life, it's so much more not carefree, but it's carefree in the way of I know it's going to be okay. And I'm like, okay, why don't I not approach that in my life like that? And I feel like I don't know if that's more just like how other countries are deal with like violence or like deal with just like conflicts that are happening. But I just feel like it's such a nice way to go about life and it's so like de-stressing and like less like just less like mentally taxing on me. And I just understand. I was like, wow, I'm like, this is great. I was like, I just kind of I still think this, that, and the third all the time. For everything that I do, I'm like, all right, this is going to happen. But it's still, but I'm like, I do that. And I remember I was like, hey, you don't have to. Like, you don't need to do that. Like, your life is still going to continue if you don't think that far ahead. And I think that's helped me so much because I'm like, okay, I know what's going to happen, but right now it's not happening. So just like, do not worry about it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So for some of our listeners who may be new to our conversation today, how would you define peace and conflict education?
Yeah. Okay. I would define this as it's identifying the conflicts and the confronting the issues, but it's not identifying them intent to fight or intent to have an argument. It's just understanding that there are injustices occurring and that there's a way to go about these without inflicting harm or without inflicting any type of pain onto someone else. It's about understanding why they're happening, understanding how we can go about this, and then also laying a foundation for peace to come through. Not for, it doesn't have to be peace immediately. It does not need to be solved immediately or anything, but it's going to build a foundation for possible peace. And I think
Mhm.
identifying peace and conflict is going to be very important, especially in education, because I think everything starts from education.
No, thank you. And what makes this field especially important in today's social and political climate? I mean, um, just such an open-ended question.
Yeah.
Would you like to take this one?
I say, well, this one I think it's so important because, especially right now, like the generation that's coming up and the generations that is right now, is with social media, everyone has a voice. No matter what, you can say whatever you want. And yes, some people will receive backlash and some people will be praised for something that they say. But when everyone has a voice, not everyone's always listening. You are kind of just trying to say whatever you can to get a view or to try to just get your opinion out there. And I think in today's age, like it's just important for people to know that like not everything that's said is always going to be true. And with everyone having something to say, the wrong message can always be conveyed. Like you can just say one thing, believe it's fact, but someone can run with that and then change the wording completely. But they're still saying, oh, I said what this person said, and it's not the same. But whenever it comes to
Mhm.
peace education, we can identify the problem quickly and effectively and then work from there. And then in the political climate as well, if something is said incorrectly in the political climate, this can affect so many people. And so we need to make sure that we are identifying in the political climate that hey, this is not just something that someone's saying. This is something that like affects a family, or this affects a
Mm.
parent, or this affects a kid. This gonna affect me, and this gonna affect you. And we need to take this thing more seriously, but also just understand that like policies do affect lives and that people need
Yeah.
to also take accountability for what they're doing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for that. And you referenced in the introduction, I referenced John Galtong's concept of structural violence. Might you go a little deeper, explain what that means in accessible terms?
Yes. All right. So stressful violence is just indirect violence. It's things that they're invisible to the naked eye. It's more so whatever you've learned like as a kid is like to try to ignore or try like, hey, this has nothing to do with you, but it really does. Stressful violence, whenever like you just see it and probably like your day-to-day life is going to be someone that's houseless. It's someone that's starving. It's kids that are struggling to get a meal at school and things like that. That's structural violence. That's not something that should be normalized. The world or America was not supposed to be built for people to struggle. It's supposed to be built for people to thrive. And there's always the thing of the American dream. But the dream is kind of gone right now because people are trying to capitalize on others rather than trying to help people. And with structural violence, you see this as something that's not, it's identified as something that's not your problem, but it is. It is your problem. It's something that's not going to physically affect people, but that's the benefit of it. That's why people benefit so much from structural violence because there's no physical effect, or at least the physical effect doesn't come until there's a built up of the indirect violence. And all of a sudden it becomes a physical harm. And people are like, oh, wait, where did this come from? Like, no, this was years and this was months and this was days of aggression just built up. And now it's finally overboiling and showing us physical harm. But they have been hurt and bantered so much that now it's resulting in physical harm. It didn't have to go to physical harm. And structural violence is going to be showing that invisible, indirect, just inhumane injustices that happen that result in physical harm.
Thank you. And how is structural violence different from more like visible or direct forms of violence, would you say?
I would say structural violence is more so the preventable acts. So it's going to be anything
Mm.
that involves possibly like inner cities, for example. Inner cities, you're going to see more like the books inside the school. They're out of date. They're a little ripped up. The computers don't work as well. The what's it called? The teachers are a little bit they're underpaid but overworked. It's things like that, and it doesn't only hurt the kid, but it makes the kids believe that you are not worthy. You are not worthy of,
Mm.
and you do not need the books that the kids in the suburbs are getting. You do not need this to succeed. You are going to be a part of the system, and it throws them into this system of it's more of a thing. It's in one of my readings, the prison school to prison pipeline, and just throws them in like a factory worker. Like, oh, you're going to do this. You're going to understand that. Well, whatever you do doesn't matter because you're going to end up going to work at the factory. You're going to end up going to work at McDonald's or something like
Mm.
that. That's the structural violence, and that's how it's not as visible as direct violence. Direct violence is going to be more like louder things. It's going to be more of, police officer arresting someone just because they're a certain color, they're a certain culture and things like that.
Yeah.
But structural violence identifies why the police is going to dig deeper and understand why the police officer has these notions and ideas about that person of culture or about that person of color.
Well, thank you. And why would you say it's important for people to recognize these forms of harm that aren't always obvious?
Yeah, I would say it's very important for people to recognize these forms because so they do not go into physical violence. Structural violence is not healthier, but almost slightly less as less harmful as direct violence because it's not happening yet. Well, it's not physically harming anyone, but it's just as impactful as direct violence. It's just as harmful. It's just as everything, but it doesn't involve possibly like the harm and like the physical harm that direct violence incurs. But the problem is that structural violence does lead to physical violence. It's always just the overboiling. Physical violence will always be a result of structural violence. So we can identify this. We can help prevent possible and even also just stop more physical violences from happening if people can learn to identify structural violence.
Thank you. Shifting a little to higher education and systems, how do you see institutions like universities intentionally reproduce inequality or structural violence in this case?
Yeah. I would say how I see it is this will be a little bit older of an example, but it's kind of in the works right now. Standardized testing, like SATs and ACT
Mhm.
prep, things like that. It's more so using those tests to get into the school. Yes, those tests are understandable. Those tests, they show if someone's going to do well in school. They're going to show if someone can read, write, do math, and everything. But those tests they're not testing people usually for their IQ is more so if you can get lucky on this test. Like, do you have a 25%
Mhm.
to get this answer right? But there's people that are great academically. They're the smartest people in the world, but they can't take they're not good at taking tests, or maybe they just have a little bit of anxiety of taking tests. But there's
Yeah.
also people that they don't have the ability to take that test multiple times. They don't have the money to be taking that test multiple times. And that is where the structural violence comes in, is that it's directly affecting people that are not as financially eligible, or they're not as open to the idea of, oh, I can take this multiple times. But no, that's not how it works. Whenever there's kids that are there's families that are on food stamps, they can't afford to always even send their kid to college. So a kid saying like, "Hey, mom, like I need SAT prep." There's no such thing as SAT prep in some people's families. It's like you either get it or you don't, and that's not how it should work. And that's how universities are also just like reproducing this inequality, as though some are starting to get progressive and they're starting to waive the SAT and they're starting to waive the ACT scores and everything, or they're saying it doesn't count as much. But that as much has the quotes around it, has the fine print of they're still going to be looking at that to let you, to get you in or to not let you in. And that's where the unequal or inequitable um, decisions start to happen. And that just like negatively affects so many kids, and like just affects so many dreams, because they weren't like provided the opportunities to be successful or just go to college because they couldn't take this test.
No, I agree. And I think part of it's also, from what I've heard, is a lot of those tests were developed way back with a certain population in mind, certain,
Yes.
you know, basically people who are Caucasian, or who have certain also economic accessibilities.
Yes.
Uh, so yeah, so and it has not really been, not to say edited or updated,
Hmm.
for the times of how times have changed, and uh, society demographics have changed. And I think it might have even been set up at a time when slavery was still um, ago.
Yeah.
So you know, for folks who sometimes think like, oh, slavery is something in the history books, it's like it's not even 100 years. You know,
Yeah.
it's like so yeah, and so it's very easy to kind of sometimes just forget about those, how things have changed so much over just a couple decades, but still some things have stayed the same. And so yeah, I in my experience having worked in higher ed, I find that there is a need for wanting to go to a more holistic approach, but then there's always the, oh wait, we're being compared to other institutions, and that
Yeah.
competition is based off of, oh, standardized tests.
Yeah.
And what, like, and so it's like at some point you either just completely ignore it, if you have, I guess, a strong enough institution, you're like, we don't need those best colleges reports to decide whether it's not going to impact our enrollment. Basically, that's what it kind of comes down to. Like, we have enough um, rapport and trust from people, but it takes a bit to get to that point, unfortunately. What I know you talked a little about some examples of institutional biases, but what are some other ones that what are some examples of institutional biases that students might experience but not immediately recognize in your experience?
Some institutional biases, I would say, something that always kind of just like racked my mind ever since I was in high school was always the my well, your ethnicity check. So whenever like I'm filling out a form or something like that, and it's like, oh, Black, just African American, Native American, Asian, or stuff like that, I was like, I always wonder, I'm like, why do you need to know this? Like, what benefit does this help you with? And I've always like I haven't really dug into this part of my research because that was more just like a personal question I always had. I was like, why? Because even when it came to job applications, I'm like, what does that have to do with anything? And I understand that DEI is starting to grow and like they need to make sure they show diversity, and that's why you always end up having kind of like the picture with the school has every picture of like the diverse friend group, someone's holding the book and they're all like laughing. And I always love seeing that picture on any like paper, like any paper I get from a school. It's like this is great. Like
So just to jump in briefly, a couple things. The worst is when they're not actual photos of students from that school and they're stock images because then you
Yeah.
see different universities or colleges using the same image. And I'm just like, no. But to get to your thing that you talked about, checking off, I always, everything comes down to money.
Hmm.
So they're getting grants. They need to report on those type of statistics.
Yes.
And so that's why they asked for that. But it is kind of odd that, you know, if anyone does a deep dive into the concept of race, as the story goes, yes, it was created by this intellectual. He published something and then they became part of the mainstream. But then afterward, it was disproven that race doesn't truly exist. But we still are stuck on that. It was like, we haven't moved on from that. And so now they ask like race and then they ask ethnicity on top of that when I think because and I think part of it is just that it simplifies things for whoever's looking at those numbers. It's easier to just categorize folks into a larger, one name that so let's just have like four or five things that captures like everybody in the world as opposed to being like you ask for ethnicities and you're like, oh wait, we have like 300 something.
Yeah.
And so not being aware of what to do. So I think that also speaks to, whether it's academia or how we I think it's part of human nature to like we need to label things and how do we label it in a way that simplifies it or makes it easier for us moving forward. When I think we've gotten to the point where hopefully some folks have realized like it's not a cookie cutter solution. It's not, the approach that someone took with like raising you as a child or helping you to become a successful student athlete is not one that, oh, we can just, we'll just multiply that by 20 and we'll get 20 of you.
Yeah.
That's just not how it works. And so, um, but alas, it's interesting because referring to like structural, so in a way, the systems to organize things or put things in order is part of that structural violence, is what I'm kind of just realizing. Because some folks might be like, oh, the structural violence is like, you know, um, some things that might be like clear flags, but so it's this order that we have. And even going back to our original, I asked this question about the field of peace and conflict
Yeah.
from someone who's been doing this for some time. I hate using the word field because it categorizes it, it limits it to
Yeah.
the point where it's like, unless I am, because people can be like, oh, it's a field that's over there. I'm doing this over here, but not being able to see how it intertwines. And even maybe just using the word field with any type of subjects, it
Hmm.
limits it so much that we can't, the engineer can't see how their work intertwines with the writer doing poetry and then the oceanographer doing marine science and so but yeah, it gets so larger. So the structural violence is the structure that has been set up around us that limits us in many ways, unfortunately.
Yes. Yeah.
In your view, what responsibility do you see higher education institutions have in addressing these issues, or have you seen them addressing these issues?
I think higher education, they need to teach they need the thing is like the like as always is education. Nothing's gonna happen unless people are told what is going on or unless they're like made aware of what's happening. And I just think that higher education, their responsibility is to, like we just said, is to educate. So I would think that they need to take the responsibility to act as like these agents, these like transformative agents in addressing these issues. And it starts with changing it starts with changing their policies. It starts with treating students as students. Whenever I don't know if I was able to hit the question of like institutional bias that students experience. I would say like students are starting to be treated more as customers, and they're treated more as learners. And I don't think people understand that that is inherently structural violence, because this is wherever you start having this built up anger, is whenever we start now having students do walkouts of classrooms. It's whenever students start rioting, or they start having sit-ins, or they start doing things to retaliate, and it's seen as, oh, the students they're ungrateful, or they should be in class, or things like that. I'm like, no, they've been treated like they are less than. They're being treated like a customer. Like they're walking into a store, they're walking into Walmart, and they're like, hey, I want to buy this TV. Well, you need to buy the TV, you need to buy the TV stand, you need to buy the remote, you need to buy this, you need to buy everything separately. Whenever education was supposed to be for everyone, it was supposed to be helping me. Now it's students like for me personally, like just even park my moped on campus, it was $75 for a semester. It's like, that's not that's not fair. And then people with cars, like, you want me to come and learn, but you're also trying to take my entire bank account while you're doing it. And then people are wondering like why students are mad, or why students like they don't want to go to campus, because we're like, I'm not going to find parking. I'm not going to be able to get to my class on time. I'm not going to be able to do this or anything. And they try to cover it up by like, oh, well, you know what? You have a free bus pass. The bus only drops you off in the middle of campus, so now you have to walk half a mile to get to your class. Like, that's not helpful.
And just to clarify, it's not free. You technically pay for it in your fees when you register for classes. So
Yeah, and you still, like, just like you said, I'm like, it's still small things that are like, that's still a part of the structural violence, and they think it's helpful, but it's not. I'm like, you're treating
yeah.
me as if I'm just basically a card that needs to be swiped. I'm like academics used to be something that like you look forward to, something that the people used to like. Oh my God, you go to college, like that's amazing. And now it's like people, now we have the discussion. I remember this discussion in high school multiple times. It's like, is college worth it? And it was always like the classroom is completely divided, and yet people's like, yes, education is important, this and that, and everyone's like, yeah, but you're getting into so much debt. Like, what was the point?
Mhm.
And for me personally, like, yes, I'm an athlete and it's been helpful, but I'm like, I have friends that aren't athletes, and they're like, oh yeah, like I have to go work tonight. And I'm like, dang, like it shouldn't be like this. It should not be almost triple digits, like $100,000 for someone just to go get an education. Like, that's not something that's fair. And they wonder why these students are starting to, why kids start to drop out, or why kids start to maybe riot, or they start to fight against what's happening. And they just say that these kids are like, oh, they're not taking this seriously. Oh, they're not, they just don't understand what's happening. They don't see the bigger picture. We do see the bigger picture. And we see that we're not being treated as students, or we're being treated as learners. We're just being treated as a part of the system, as someone that this university gets a check from because I'm in the seat. And that's just crazy to me, that I'm like, I remember like finding out like how much money the school gets, because that's why you get so in trouble if you miss a certain amount of classes. It's not because the usually the professor's mad at you. It's like, no, like now the university's losing money. And I was like, wow. I was like, huh.
And I found most organizations, including higher, not just including higher education, but I've been to include, it's a business.
Yes,
And the bottom line is you track the money trail. Many times decisions are made because how will that impact the bottom line, the
yes,
budget, or our revenue? And yeah, as much as there's the nuance of like, oh, higher education is a place for to enrich your mind and be able to dig deeper into certain specific subjects you may really enjoy and be able to develop something new, contribute to the field or to society. Yeah, it is still run under the umbrella of it's a business and people got to get paid. There's the standard of living. Well, I mean, I don't have to tell you how expensive it is to live in Hawaii. And then, yeah, and with everything else going on across the nation. And so they have to figure out, but you do bring up some really good questions of like, and then I think the pandemic, I reflect on that is like, it was an opportunity to kind of like take a step back and yeah, I know everyone was forced to go online, and I know not every online class experience was amazing, but I think there were some that were great. And I think part of it was just the ones that were not that great was partially because I don't think people are. the instructors and faculty were trained to how to teach online. They were just like, let me turn on the Zoom and let's pretend that what I did in person, I can do over Zoom and without having to do any edits, any pivoting, any adjustments to my teaching, and which we all know definitely needed to be done. Um, but I think what it also made students realize is like, oh, I can do my education online and not sacrifice my time of like traveling to campus. Oh, I can't work that shift because I have to go to this class. Oh, I can catch up on that class later when I get back from work, that kind of stuff. So being able to juggle, I guess, or make things happen. And yeah, and obviously, I think there's a general sense of once the quote unquote pandemic ended, some folks believe it ended, some folks are like, it's still happening. I, I I don't think there were lessons to be learned from the pandemic, and I don't think they were truly acknowledged because the bottom line went back to the budget, and it's like, well, we can't we can't continue everything online because then how do we justify having all this space, all these offices,
Yes.
like all this land? Do we not need it? But then that changes the dynamic already, and it really, I think it comes down to comfort,
Mm-hmm.
the comfort of the routine. As a human being, we love routines. We love, okay, we're going to wake up, we have breakfast, we go to my job, I teach. But the pandemic was like, oh no, things are going to shake things up. And yeah, I think there was a missed opportunity for a lot of wonderful lessons coming out of the pandemic. And also just an opportunity to kind of come together and talk about. No, I have yet to had any experience where anyone was like, "Oh, let's sit down and talk about how was that for you?" Whether it was a year and a half, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. It's been 6 years now since it started. Um, it's such a missed opportunity to like have conversations, build community, figure out what's working for you, what's not working for you, what can we do to do things better. And yeah, it was more of like, let's get back to
Mm-hmm.
let's go back to the old way, and yeah, I mean, and but it hasn't been like that for every business. I know there's a lot of, especially like corporate businesses or even nonprofits that were like, why do we need to be spending money renting out this building? People can
Yes.
work remotely. They've shown that they are responsible and can work remotely. And we can be saving that money for like, hey, we'll give our employees a raise and we can bring on other employees to help out with all this extra work. Or maybe it's a holiday bonus. Maybe it's creating more opportunities for retreats for people to come together intentionally, not to just have meetings.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah. Yeah, we're on the same page as far as like missed opportunities and
Yeah.
but I mean as a student athlete though I can't imagine you couldn't. How was that? You because no, you were, so you weren't able to practice uh
No.
while
Um,
the pandemic was happening,
mhm.
so that was part of coming back.
Yeah.
And that's a business in itself right there.
Yeah. That's really weird. Because I remember it hit my sophomore year of high school, and I think I was like mid-year, probably about to like basketball season had just ended. Didn't really know what's going on. Then all of a sudden, like spring break hit. All of a sudden, we're not coming back after spring break, and go into my junior year, and volleyball season starts, and my coach is like, "Hey, like, okay, guys, we have practice, but come to practice with a mask on, so like you can barely breathe." Because like they didn't really, because like if you have the paper mask, like that's gonna you sweat it out in 30 minutes and you go switch it out. But if you have the regular mask, like now you have that cloth is getting dirty. Like girls are starting to get a little more sick because like you're breathing in the same air. And then like it's also just wasn't helpful because like everyone's bringing their mask down to breathe, so like everyone's nose is just out. So it's like this isn't that helpful. And then you're trying to also like, and then going into like maybe like my freshman year of college, to where now I'm like, okay, now we're back. We're kind of back in the swing of things, going to my sophomore year, and like the new freshmen come in. And I vividly remember it was like a very different shift from, because I remember my freshman year, as for my freshman class, we were like quiet. Like we don't say anything. Like I am a freshman. I am down here. I am bottom of the barrel right now. I need to, like, my upperclassmen, they were great. I love those girls. They didn't treat us like they didn't hate us or anything. They didn't treat us like a freshman, like scum of the earth or anything. They still like they're like they came like, hey, no, there's mutual respect here. Yes, like, are you gonna do some extra stuff? Yes, and I am perfectly fine with that. I understood that as a freshman. But I vividly remember seeing like the next freshman class, and they immediately came in talking to everybody. Like one, I remember she like walked up to me in the middle of the lounge and just like turned my chair and just started talking to me and leaning on me. I was like, I I don't know you. I'm like, that's very different. And I had to remember, I was like, wow, it's like these girls came from eighth grade and probably skipped all the way to their junior year. They never had that time in their like those key years, like from ninth to 10th grade, when like upperclassmen are telling you, like, hey, be quiet. Like whatever you say is not important. And they didn't have that. And I was like, oh, and like I see it again this year, like the freshmen coming in and they're like immediately like saying their like talking their mind, speaking their mind and doing all this. I was like, okay, it's good that you have your voice, but I'm like, that's not how this is going to work. That's not how everything's going to work. I'm like, and I'm over here stuck in, I guess now we would probably say the more traditional of, hey, you come in and then you slowly build yourself up. But now they're coming in, they're like, no, I'm like, all right, they're coming in, they're like, no, we're on the same level. I'm like, ooh, this is not how it's going to work. And I feel like it was such a crazy, like, switch to me. And I've like talked to my friends, I've talked to like my parents about this like multiple times. I was like, they came in and immediately thought we're the same, which I'm not thinking I'm like I'm better than anyone or anything, but it's like there's also like freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. I'm like, there's levels, but they immediately came in and immediately thought, I'm like, no, 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 no. But it's for the better. It's for like, I know how this is going to work. Let me help you, rather than you coming in and immediately trying to change everything. But they never had that shift. That shift of, oh, I'm going from here to here. They just immediately came in and they're already at the top. And that was crazy to me to think about. It's like, wow, this is so different. Like, this is a completely different generation. And technically, yes, we're still part of both like Gen Z, but like to me, like Gen Z is separated, is completely separated too.
So just to take it back, these different, so going back to your comments on the way certain things should be, could that be part of the structural violence that we've been talking about also?
So yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because, not to say that it has to be hazing or anything along those lines, but I think as I pivoting to higher ed a bit, one of the things I always, because I teach, and one of the things I always try to like get beyond is like, don't call me Mister, don't call me Doctor. I mean, I don't even have my doctor yet. Just call me by my first name. I'm trying to get beyond that, like the pedestal that already higher education puts like
Mhm.
the instructors or lecturers or faculty on, because I think it creates. I get why it exists, but I also have seen how it creates walls. It
Mhm.
creates restrictions into the learning process. It just seems very like one way. Like I mean, just from my own experience, when I was an undergrad, I remember some faculty where it was like they would show up and they would just lecture for like an hour and a half. It just rarely would they ever look at the students. They would just look at the floor or turn back, write things on the board, keep talking and talking, and then be like, okay, that's it, class, and then just walk out, take no questions, none of that. And I get that at some point maybe that's how it was, but that was not a good way to learn. It was
Yeah.
just and I remember the the faculty that truly I was like, I remember were the interactive ones, the ones that kept asking questions, the ones that not only had information to share with you, but they also wanted to learn from you.
Mhm.
And I think that was a whole nother level. But yeah, it's I was just reflecting upon. But yeah, no, I think that there is people talk about like social cues that might have been lost because of the pandemic. Um, Social interactions. Yeah, I mean, it is. I'm still trying to understand the new generation because for the most part, what I've gathered is there's a lot for me to learn. There, I mean, I was part of the last. I think the last generation that I wasn't introduced to computers until I went to college.
Mhm.
But most folks, I imagine like yourself, you've had a semblance or know what a computer has been or a smartphone since you were really young.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so when people talk about like, oh, growing up in the 90s and not having social media, not having cameras everywhere, not having, I mean, also it was kind of like scary to think that like, oh, you would just go out and play outside and your parents would just assume you'd come back at a certain hour. Whereas nowadays it's like, I don't know about that. I don't know if I feel comfortable with that. So yeah, times have changed definitely. Um, but shifting a little to, you mentioned about research and case studies. Can you share a bit about a case study or example from your research that really stood out to you, as well as like what patterns or themes did you notice when analyzing structural violence in everyday life?
Yes. This one, it was, I have like about three case studies that I'm using. One that stood out to me for sure that I think kind of gives a more better general idea. I think I'm still trying to, in my research in the other two case studies that I'm going to be mainly using, I'm still trying to break those down, but this one stood out to me the easiest. And it has to do with the healthcare system. So there was a study and they're using obstructive pulmonary disease, the breathing difficulties and stuff like that. And the basis of the study was to uniquely frame the illness rather than something that, oh, this person has this disease. Like, oh my God, like they did this to themselves. And they reframed it into saying this has been done to them. So it's changes from your personal, like this was your fault, to this was the system failing you. This is something that was a result of multiple failures that have added up and have now affected you. And by changing the social structures and the institutions that these rob people of their life chances. And with that, it was providing a systemic framework that people are able to link to like social determinants of health to institutional harm. And then it like identifies like delayed diagnosis. It identifies neglect to people that are a little bit more financially unstable, more so like the poverty, and then ends up how this turns into physical injury. So as a result of maybe it was started from um like a spill that happened in the street. It took a while to clean up. The chemicals get into the air. Someone starts to breathe it in, and then it was reported, but no one really decided to take care of it. And result, it ends in someone now having this pulmonary disease. And it just shows like the steps, and it's almost like a stair. How every step you took up, it just shows the effect that structural violence had, and now it turned into physical violence. It turns into a physical injury, and this person's life's at stake. And it all started from something that happened that wasn't taken seriously, but it's because they were not identified as important. Sorry, a little cough.
All good, all good. No, thank you. Thank you for that. And how do these larger systems show up in the ways people might overlook them in their daily routines? I feel like what I'm learning right now is like there's a lot that we should be questioning,
Yeah,
but we just become like pawns basically.
I would say these will most likely show more in someone's everyday life. You're going to see for campus right now. Let's say campus right now. There's a lot of construction happening on upper campus. Meaning, like a lot of things need to be fixed. That's okay. That's perfectly fine. If you take this back and it's now we're going to like an elementary school, and like a regular, probably not the best city, but also like a little bit. Everyone kind of has like a nice low to mid income city. So now you have an elementary school, you have the low to middle income city, but there's always construction happening. So something always needs to be fixed. There's always like, oh, this park was open in maybe like 2002, but ever since 2003, this park has been closed, and now it's like 2020. Now we're in 2026. Like there's places like that that have like construction just everywhere, and that just starts to take like a mental toll on a child of seeing like, oh, my home clearly just isn't important. Like the city just started to forget me, and then all of a sudden it goes into now they're going into college. They don't see a future. They don't really like some people. Whenever you see your surroundings, you just don't see how you can change this. You don't see how you can make this a benefit. And I think people started to, because I look at the construction on campus as, oh yeah, they're trying to get better, but also like, oh, now everything needs to be fixed. And I think that can also start to take a mental toll on a kid because they're like, oh, everything I'm coming from is not good enough. It always has to be fixed. And I think that maybe some people just thought that like, oh, like this is just a new building. No, this building had history. This building had like such a great story, especially being in here, especially just specifically in Hawaii. Like buildings, these places, they have stories, the names that they come from, and everything. But as you start to go and you start to like live on, you just start to learn. It's like, oh, so everything that I came from needs to be fixed. And I think that's like a structural violence that people see in their everyday life, and they just don't even think anything of it.
No, thank you. So I could see how this is these different structures that have been set in place, whether intentionally or unintentionally. It sounds, I mean, some of them definitely, like we just organize things like I was talking about earlier, to try to make things to help us understand things, but in turn, it could be having a negative impact um, on future generations or current communities. Um, so, how do we? I'm just because first I was going to ask about like how does structural violence impact different communities in different ways, and maybe there's other things we haven't talked about, but also just wondering about like the consequences of ignoring these systemic issues over time. I mean,
I think kind of the answer to both those questions is kind of the same. Whenever I think about it, I think structural violence, like the impact or just like ignoring the consequences, it limits people's potential. It for sure
mm,
it puts a either invisible barrier, a physical barrier, a mental barrier. It just puts a barrier on something that should have been great. That when people do not see success, like if you do not see success in your community, you're not going to believe you can succeed yourself. And I think a lot of stories like people like growing up like Viola Davis and like women like that, women in power and things like that. She like says in her like story multiple times, she's like, I didn't see anyone that was like me on TV. I didn't see anyone that
mm,
was out of my city and doing well. So like whenever you don't see that, you don't believe that she can do that. Yes, her story, she's a great woman now, award winner and everything. But there's still other kids like that like if they don't see it, they don't believe that they can do that. And even if they do make it to college, there's still something in them that's like, well, made it to college, but what do I do now? Because now college is
mm,
set up from, oh, college supposed to be a gateway into the workforce, but now a lot of kids can't even get a job. So, and what, like, and now that we have to get to the part to where, what responsibility do colleges need to take to ensure that now their students have a future afterwards? Because if I can have 10 degrees if I wanted to, but a lot of places are like, okay, well, where's your experience? I was like, well, I was in college. And they're like, well, that doesn't matter anymore. And like, so
right.
now the degree just doesn't matter. I'm like, all right. And I'm right back to ground zero. And then again, that's how we start getting into the fights, the riots and stuff like that from the structural violence of I was set up to succeed, but I was never laid a foundation to ever get better.
Kind of goes back to that saying that people sometimes are like, it's about who you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's whether it's networking or whether it's generational power or wealth or, it's um, so so how do you think individuals can begin to recognize and challenge structural violence in their own environments?
Mm-hmm. Recognize and challenge. I would say for one, you just need to see things more for what they are than what they're like portrayed to be. So
Mm,
it's idea of like how we just said the standardized testing and everything. A lot of people think it's like, oh, well, it's going to prove if you're smart enough to get into college. Everyone's smart enough to get into college. It's really actually not that. Like, it's not as difficult as it's supposed to be shown. They try to show it like it's impossible because the thing that they've hammered into every kid or hammered into every parent is you want to be a part of the special group. You want to be a part of the 1%.
Mm.
And everyone believes college is supposed to be the 1%. No, college is everyone. College, like, how you, I can't believe that they always say 1%. I'm like, you have people that are like studying rocks, studying grass. You have people that are studying cancer. You have people that are also like studying film. Like, yes, we're all great people, but like we try to exclude each other so much and try to make a difference that now you're just reproducing the same problem of, oh well, I can't do that. Like now you just have kids just psyching themselves out like, oh, I can't do college, I can't do this, I can't do that. And
Mm.
like that to where, oh no, I can, like, no, they're trying to separate you. There's no reason for the separation. And that's where the structural violence again comes from. It's like you want to try to everything's try to be, oh, I'm better than this, I'm better than you, I'm better than that. When it's not, it shouldn't be like that. So I think if people can identify whenever there's a force for separation, that can help us so much.
Thank you. Shifting a little to for listeners today, thinking about, you know, action, because I don't want folks to just walk away from this conversation thinking, well, what do I do next? And so thinking about tools for change, what are some practical tools or approaches that peace and conflict practitioners use to address systemic harm that you found in your research, and also like how can students or young professionals get involved in this kind of work?
Yeah. I would say a lot of it will be just from active listening, just understand that people are different. Some of it because some things that I've learned is just from asking a question to someone that is of a different culture, different minority, just raised differently than me. And I would think like building awareness. Like you don't need to understand everything. You don't need to know everything. Just be aware that things are different. Just be open to being aware that things are different and that be okay with a little bit of scrutiny. Yes, it doesn't always come from negative. It doesn't have to be negative. Like scrutiny can be good. You need to know what is wrong in order to fix something. If you just immediately try to fix everything, you're never going to get down to the root cause of what's happening. And I think this is going to stem from a little bit of peer learning. It also comes from individual research. You need to research some things for yourselves. Like you can't always trust other people to tell you what's going on. And I like remember I think I was on a visit to another school and this girl, like it was some other girls that were talking. I just like overhear the conversation. And this girl, I believe she was Indian, and she was like educating one of her like roommates on why she wears the or like why she wears the hijab, why she does something. And it's things like that like students that are more minorities have to they get the extra burden or extra like assignment of no, now I have to teach you what's going on in my life. But there's certain other students that don't have to do that. You don't have to worry about that. And I was like, it's just an extra thing that now like you don't ask for, but like it's just placed onto you. Like I've been asked so many questions about like my like things that have to do with my race. And I'm like, there's kids that don't have to deal with that. And yes, like it's good to talk, it's good to speak about it, but it's better to like do it individually first because sometimes like adding like yes, you want like you probably had good intentions of asking that question, but like it's just something that like these kids have had to go through for years and years and years of having to educate people on something else whenever they also have work to do too. Now that now that this girl probably had to teach her friend about why she wears a hijab or why she does this or why she does that, and now she has to go on. She's like, crap, like that probably took a mental toll on her. And now she's like, oh, now I gotta go do an assignment. Like that's a lot. And like what students can do is just understand like, okay, yeah, there's a difference. Maybe let's like hold a little peer learning thing. Let's invite an expert to speak on this human rights movement. Let's maybe participate in a few outreach projects. Let's just understand what's going on. And like the dialogue is so important in this. Dialogue will like just help you understand what is happening. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. It's just going to be speaking about it for right now.
Thank you. It's it's interesting how I have found that saying dialogue is easier said than done,
Hmm.
because whether folks are just juggling life, we and thank you if I know I've said it already, but thank you for being here today. I just want to say it again, just because shifting back to like this gives us an opportunity to actually have a dialogue about
Mhm.
this, as opposed to just a brief conversation in passing. Um, but it also makes me think about how many times do folks actually get to just have a conversation that goes for at least an hour with one person, where the conversation is insightful and you get to dig deeper and get to like, and maybe folks may be able to reflect upon it. May have happened here or there, but like, when was the last time you were able to do that? It's because we have all these tools to help us manage things like text messaging and like emails, and because it's I always find it humorous when people have like a cell phone plan, and I'm like, you should look at it. Breaks it down like, how much time do you spend searching stuff on the internet, so using your data? How much time do you spend texting? How much text messages have you sent? And how much time do you actually spend talking on the phone with someone? And that last part is always so small or like insignificant. And so I'm like, maybe shift a little better, like just pick up a phone and call someone. It's so funny when I do it, because people are like, "Hello, hi," like they didn't expect a phone call, and especially when there's a lot of like text messages that are like really long. I'm just
Mhm.
like, just figured we could just talk about this instead of like having to text back and forth, and we could just settle whatever we needed to. If we need to schedule something, if that's the case. Um, but yeah, it is. Thank you for putting a spotlight on dialogue and how important that is, because that's truly, I mean, at the core of what this podcast is, and at the core of like everything that I do. And I always find it kind of amusing that I get brought in to like do different talks and do trainings, and I always like walk out afterward, and like, as I reflect, I'm like, I'm just telling people to have conversations with each other. It's not rocket science, but if people need to be reminded, sure, I'm happy to keep doing that. Um, but in the role that dialogue plays, what role does dialogue play in shifting systems, not just relationships? And as I say that, I just want to, for folks listening, it's not networking. It is
Yes.
definitely not networking. I'm not talking about, passing out your business cards. I'm talking about having those deep conversations about having shared experiences with folks. Um, so have you had that experience where you've been able to, the role of dialogue in shifting some certain systems?
Yeah, I would say I just think like dialogue and conversation have been so underappreciated recently, especially like how you just said, like phone calls are just like the least thing ever. Like nothing, no one else really does a phone call anymore. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I do not want to pick up my phone every 2 minutes. Like if we can do a phone call, I'd much rather do a phone call. I think I like finally have one of my friends start doing like the voice messages. I was like, that would be so much better than trying to test back and forth for 30 minutes. Just send me a little voice message. I'll send you one back or I'll just answer you real quick, but it's so much better. I think the ability and the effectiveness of dialogue, it just helps you build. It helps with especially like physical, like one-on-one interaction. It helps you build off one another. So like I really enjoy the conversations where I learn. Like if I believe most people in my life, like if I'm not learning anything from you, I don't really need like we don't really need to have that much conversation because that's just talking. That's not conversation. There's such a difference between like talking, conversation, and dialogue. I think like dialogue has more of like the academic, more the emotional effect. Conversation is just like, oh, like we get dinner. I'm just catching up with you, talking. It's just like, hey, how are you? All right, let's go. But dialogue, it has intention. Dialogue has so much intention on I have something that I want to resolve, or I have something that we need to come to a conclusion on. And I think dialogue in this instance of like structural violence affecting the interpersonal conflict, it's understanding why are we differing right now? Like what caused this issue? And I would think that whenever like you have this shift, it's effective, it's very helpful, it's making people aware of what is happening. Like I think awareness is just going to be the first step, and awareness is only going to come from someone saying, oh, this is happening, or you acknowledging that this is happening. And so I think that's pretty much it. That dialogue will just it's like the only thing that's going to start the shift in any system.
No, thank you. So, shifting a little to just your own reflection of your journey that you're on right now, how has studying in this field changed the way you see the world, or is it something that you had this perspective before you even delved into some of this research, or just wondering well, first I'm wondering like what was the yeah when did this all come about for you, and what brought it together?
Um, I think, of course, like I've always just been very interested in like not conflict per se, but just like why I always want to know why. Like why are people arguing? Why do we like immediately have these little
And there's nothing wrong to say that you're interested in conflict. I just want to like put that out there because I saw you pause on that one because people might get the wrong impression. But I
yeah,
do want, I look at conflict as like it's beautiful. It's an opportunity to grow, to
yes.
learn from each other. Without it, it just kind of seems like a very dull life otherwise.
Yes. Okay. Well, yeah, I'll be 100% with it then. I'm like I have always just enjoyed conflict. It's just because my opinion, conflict does not always have to be bad. It doesn't.
Exactly.
I've had so many conversations with people whenever because a lot of friends that I know, they're like, "Oh, well, I don't like confrontation. I don't like that was the biggest word I feel like I heard for like the past 2 years. Like I hate confrontation." And I'm like, and I remember telling people, it's like confrontation is so different than just having a conversation or a dialogue that we were saying. But I'm like,
Yeah.
we're not. They're like, well, what do you? And like they kind of look at me weird. And I'm like, confrontation means I am coming with you and I want to fight with you. Like I want to argue. I want you
Yeah.
you're wrong and I'm right. I want you to know that like everything you said has no meaning. I'm like, we're not like that's not what conflict has to be. Conflict can be just two people that are very strong minded and they're just having a conversation. Yes, might will some things differ? Yeah. But I'm like, I'm not coming at you with ill intent. Confrontation means that you are like going to this person with ill intent and that you want them to lose. Like that is not what conflict is about.
Yeah.
Conflict is about exploring like yes, we're going to differ, but I'm about to learn something from you. And it's so
And sorry, just briefly want to jump in. I think part of it's also we don't know everyone's lived experience, and unfortunately, majority of us learn about the negative side of the conflict, or only really see that side growing up, whether it's in the household, whether it's at school or in the community, on the news, and so we associate that, and we don't want that, and so we basically phase out or close it out, and so there's unspoken trauma.
yeah.
There's a lot of whether not only generational trauma, it's just ongoing trauma that I've yet to meet anyone who has no trauma. I
Mhm.
think folks might say they don't, but I think if something like conflict is a trigger, well, there's some trauma right there to kind of explore.
Yes, exactly. But I was like, there's something about I'm like, no, I'm like conflict to me is like it's beautiful. It's like I was like, wow. Because it's nothing like someone's like people's mind is just so the mind is crazy. The if I was to study anything out, it could be like a brain surgeon or something like because the mind is so crazy to me. And there's a lot that happens in it, but that's so good. Like the way that two differing things can come together, and then now we have like a whole new world because of that. And I think that people are just so scared because like and one of the I don't understand. I don't not sure if it was this course and another course. Like we have the difference between negative peace and positive peace. Like people don't understand that not all peace is good. Like just because they're like, oh, there's peace. I was like, no, they still like like these two countries still hate each other. Or like, oh,
Yeah,
there's peace. No, every time these two people are in a room, like they can't even talk. Like that's not peace. That's just like, oh, we kind of just dealt with it and we slid it under the rug. I'm like, no.
yeah.
If we have conflict, we can build and we can learn. And I don't understand. I'm like, that's not conflict is not confrontation. And there needs to be a separation between that. That might just be my next. research paper if I have to, is that conflict is not confrontation. Confrontation is like I want to fight you basically. That's how I always see confrontation. And I'm like, I
Yeah.
think from growing up and like learning from like my parents, like they never really argued in front of me, but they always told me like, hey, if you have something, like tell me. Or like if they were probably like talking or like they probably were arguing with each other, my parents were still having a conversation. It was never just like, oh, I'm coming
Mm,
at you and you're coming at me. It was never that. And I like love them for that, that they like I got to see that. Cause I'm like, yes, I know not everything's always gonna be lilies and roses and happy all the time. They're like, no, like my mom has told me, she's like, no, like, like we argued and stuff like that. And I'm like, but thank you. I'm like, it shows me that conflict is normal. People always think that like their life should be perfect. I'm like, no. I feel like if your life doesn't have conflict in it, you're not challenging yourself. No one's challenging. And if I
yeah.
have a life that aren't challenging me, what was the point? What was I supposed to learn?
Yeah. It reminds me a little bit about modeling, where especially someone's always watching. And in households, the youth are always watching the adults, whether they're having a conflict in the conversation or not, or even just showing emotions, of like saying, I love you. That can be, I know people who grew up in households who never heard their parents say that to each other, or kiss each other in the cheek or anything along those lines, let alone like on the lips or anything like that. So yeah, it is all about what type of ambience do we want to nurture and create for our youth around us. It's a lot to like think about. It's like what structures, uh, but it's and also understanding we're all figuring it out. So you're not going to have everything all squared away. And I mean, especially as I think about, shifting back to like you have first year students who are new student athletes who uh, whether you want to or not, or whether they say it or not, they're looking at you as like, oh, what is she doing? How does she behave? How does she portray? Or like, when this recording goes out, if they happen to come across it, it's like, oh wow, I had no idea that's where her mindset is. Or like, I'd love to have a further conversation about some of the things she just talked about. It's like that's that's the beauty of it. So as so one thing you mentioned, positive negative piece, that is the class that we're in right now. And thank you for bringing it up. And for folks listening, please just do a little dive into like differences between positive and negative piece. For folks studying psychology, it's very in line with like positive and negative psychology a bit. But yeah, anytime folks talk about, oh, the absence of conflict or the lack of war, that is really a perception of negative peace. Well, positive peace is actionable. It's social justice. It's hard work. It's what everyone does every day. It's taking proactive steps. My example I always give to people is like, are you pursuing an education? Are you still in school? Wonderful. You're nurturing your brain. You're doing proactive work right now. You're practicing positive peace. You go to the doctors or the dentist, you're taking care. You call your loved ones. You're practicing positive peace right there. So and I think that's part of the getting beyond the field concept, that peace is actually, or peace building is embedded in all aspects of our everyday lives. It's just how do we shift our perspective to be able to see it in that, and does it help or not? I mean, for some it does, for some it's like, okay, whatever. But it's just another layer, another lens to this
Yeah.
world. Um, but so as you are in this graduate certificate studying, and has it shifted, has studying changed the way you see the world? Has it influenced how you navigate conflict in your own life? Or you could just be like, no, I knew all this stuff already. As well as like, what's been the most challenging part of engaging in this type of work?
Yeah. I would say I think some of it, I would say, I think some of it I was already doing part of my life. I was like,
Mm,
whenever like doing some of the readings, I was like, okay, I'm like, wow, I'm like, all right, I'm kind of doing good at this. Like, wow, like I do the right things. This kind of feels like how I already act. I have like, I would say like it has though taken effect on me because I have caught myself wanting to say something, but I reframe it now. I go from maybe if someone asks me, like if someone comes at me with a question that I'm like, I kind of want to have like a kind of more not as proper response to. I take a step as like I'm like like there's no reason to come at them like that. There's no reason to try to speak to them that way. Let's reframe this. Let's think about what you just learned in your reading. Let's think about what you just learned in your class, and then like I kind of just answer them in a different way, or I ask a question in a different way than I did previously. I feel like that's like made me grow so much more, and it's also helped me just like get to know like my friends even better because I one main thing that I remember learning is stop trying to relate to people. I think yes, a lot of the stuff like people always want to be related to, but it's I think everyone probably does this is whenever someone tells you a story and you're like, oh yeah, this happened to me. I've realized I have stopped doing that. I like maybe if like I'm just talking to my girls and like we're just having a little like fun time, like yeah, I do that. But now when I realize when I get into more serious conversations, I've kind of just stopped doing that. And I think that's helped me so much because now this person understands like I feel like look relating to them sometimes just makes something that they need to cut off and that they're like, oh, I'm talking too much about myself. I never want any someone that's close to me. Like if I'm having a conversation with you, I never want you to think that you're talking too much about yourself. That's not something that I because I feel like a lot of people have probably been quieted. So they're like, oh, let me stop, let me ask about you. I don't if I want to say something about myself, I will tell you later. But at this moment and this time, like this is about you. So I think these readings and like that's the way to build peace is understanding. So like I need to understand why you're saying this. What's happening with you? And I think the way that we have reframed, the way I've reframed the way I think, it's just about, oh, I don't like, they understand. They're like, hey, I still care about what you're saying. I don't need to tell them apart. Like, oh, that happened to me too. I'm like, I don't need to do that anymore. And I think that's helped me a lot, especially with like understanding how people act or like understanding like why they think something wasn't fair, stuff like that. And I think I'm just going to continue with this even after this like research is done and everything. It's just to understand like why people do what they do, like why is conflict a thing, and like just learn this like you don't need to relate to everything. I think that's very helpful to me. And then I'm like if they want to ask, they will ask. But if not, like my life will continue. Life will continue if they understand like hey, like yeah, maybe the same thing did happen to me. They don't need to know.
Thank you. That's really beautiful. I love that. I think one thing that kind of comes to mind as you're sharing is we talked about dialogue, which, and you mentioned reframing, but one thing we haven't talked about is active listening. But we talked about it, we're doing it, but we haven't actually said the word. And I think sometimes it's a lost art, but it's also by saying to someone like, "Oh yeah, I know how that feels." It's almost like you're dismissing the whole art of active listening is just thrown out. You're not acknowledge. You might think you're acknowledging them by saying like, "Oh yeah, me too," but it also can come off as like, "Oh, I'm done talking about this. Let's talk about something else now because this is uncomfortable." Uh, so it's there's so many ways to interpret it. That's what I'm getting at. That by just and it also reminded me of like I've been in spaces where I get brought in, whether it's as a mediator, facilitator, or just me, myself, and I. Um, and sometimes I'm asked to come into these spaces where, like, I would never think to like be like, oh yeah, I can do that. Like, it hasn't been an experience that I've had before. That's what I'm getting at. But after the experience, I love reflecting upon like, oh, I was able to pull from these other experiences I've had, not similar ones, but so one example is like, um, facilitating a conversation around people who are grieving
Mm-hmm.
the loss of a loved one. I've never been in that space of having to facilitate that, but I have lost loved ones. I have grieved or continue to grieve. And so I can connect to that emotion, and sometimes it's just get a sense of the space and folks, and sometimes people just want someone to be there to listen. So it kind of goes back to the act of listening, how powerful it can be. So thank you for creating that space for folks.
Yeah, I feel like that's
uh,
just a key thing to like understand where structural violence comes from. It's just like you just have to actively listen. Do not try to relate because I think someone else describes as structural violence is going to be completely different than probably what other people think structural violence is. And like if we can just listen and understand that like, hey, they're both this. It's always the you need to separate yourself from the problem. The problem is this, and I'm like I think people like hurt like stop themselves from the separation. Like you said, like oh I've talked enough about me. That's not that's not what we're trying to do. I'm like we're trying to have you and we're trying to have the issue and we need to understand the issue.
Yeah, so true. So what gives you hope um, when it comes to addressing structural violence and inequality? Uh, is it the dialogue? Is it the reframing? Is
Uh,
it
honestly, I mean, I think what gives me hope, honestly, is the conflict because I think that's what I want is for the conflict to happen because I know that will result in something, and it doesn't have
Mhm.
again, it doesn't have to be a negative thing, but I think conflict is so good and it's so helpful that because it starts a conversation. No matter what, to have conflict is still to have conflict, you have to have at least two parties going back and forth with one another, and they're both going to be so strong headed and so educated and on their sides that when they start conversating, they're going to understand like, wow, like most likely want the same thing. We're just going about it different ways. And I think that
Mhm.
most conflicts, that's how most conflicts like happen. It's like we want the same thing, we're going about it different ways. So it's not even, and then it doesn't become an argument per se. It just becomes a conversation that might have been a little bit more strong, like feelings were driving this rather than maybe like facts and things like that. But it will, no matter what, is always going to result in a solution that you both wanted. And I think that's what gives me hope is that the conflict that will come from this and the conflict that will start from this, and that because conflict is going to start a change no matter what.
Mhm. It just as I'm listening to you, I'm reflecting upon how I realize it is because of conflict that comes up that you become aware of like, oh, I shouldn't do things a certain way, or this is not landing the way I thought. Whatever I may have said or done non-verbally could be misinterpreted, and it is conflict. It's part of that conversation, part of the dialogue. I mean, even as I reflect upon like, here in Hawaii, we've had some storms that have created conflict. There's been flooding but also just the inspiring part of like the community coming together
Mm-hmm.
to help out, to take time to like, hey, what do you need? You need, human power, you need, help cleaning stuff up, or like you need supplies donated. So that's inspiring. I mean, it's not to I can keep going with like conflicts happening in this nation, things happening worldwide. Like, um, it also brings out people who normally wouldn't say anything to speak up and be like, this is just wrong.
Yeah.
And it's not to get into athletes athletics, but I don't know if you heard about the Charles Barkley
Oh.
commentary. Whatever people may think of Charles, and but the fact that he's never been the one to really like take a political stand. I mean he has a voice and he makes himself heard often when it comes to the realm of sports, but rarely do I hear him as being like someone to critique politicians, and so to just use his platform for that, a platform that would normally just be utilized for folks who are coming to just hear about sports. um it's like a check-in. It's like, what more can we all do to so yeah, so it's a I think, not to say that it would be nice if we lived in a world where we didn't need these conflicts to awaken us, but it almost feels as though like you know, yeah. And even I don't know if there could be ever a time when everything would be perfectly great, because I don't think it would be great for everybody. There'd always be something that's missing out, as different structures are created, different new structures of violence are are embedded. And so, yeah, I mean, it's like this ongoing, but what I love about it is this ongoing, it's not quitting. It's an ongoing journey and hope for to do better than what we are.
Yes.
And whether it's the human spirit, just whatever what you want to classify it. I don't want to classify it as something because that kind of perpetuates the structures that we're talking about. But what advice would you give to someone who wants to make a difference but doesn't know where to start?
I would, I think I would tell someone like just take a second, just like honestly just reflect first before you even think of starting anything. You need to
Yeah.
understand, for one, why do you want to start? Like we can have this conversation and someone like, oh, I want to start, maybe use like understand the difference between negative piece and positive piece, or I want to start maybe reframing the way I think. But like you need to know why you want to do it, because if you're doing it for someone's first, like other people's benefit, it's not going to work for you. You need to do it
Mm,
for your personal growth. And I think it's just like it's small things. It's understanding, oh, this person is probably that's houseless, or this person that's houseless is not their fault. It was most likely a system's fault that they fell into, and now they're just like a product of what happened. Because a lot of these people are retired military, or they're veterans that fought for this country, and they thought that they were going to be set up for a life afterwards, but
mm,
some form got messed up, or something happened, or like they maybe got injured, and then they had a little slight addiction, and then now they couldn't afford their house, and now they're on the streets. Like there's things of, you need to see people as a product would happen to them, and not see them as, oh, they did this to themselves. And I think that's the separation that you need to see first before you can really start. And I think if you see that separation first, now you can start. Now you can start seeing things as, oh, well, what made them end up here? Like how I said with the disease, it's not something some person has, it's something that happened to them. Like this is
mm,
it's not their fault, and you need to understand that difference before you can really start. And then starting is honestly very simple. It's just talking. It's talking to people. It's understanding like, hey, people are different. It's little things of like, just like how I said, like, just don't, like, if someone's telling you something, you don't have to say me too. You just let them keep going. Or if you see, or if like you understand that like, hey, this is unequal, you just need to see, like, let's just see why. Like, why is it unequal? Let's just understand. I think that's how you can really start. You don't need to make like a big change. You don't need to do anything huge. It's just little small things like that.
I love that. Thank you. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for, as we wrap up today's conversation, just reminded that conflict isn't just something that happens between individuals or something we need to be fearful of. And if we are, there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's just speaks to our own trauma, and that maybe we need some therapy and we need to have further conversation. But part of it's also that dialogue. It's often conflicts embedded within the system we live in. So understanding concepts like structural violence challenges us to definitely look deeper, to question what we've normalized, and to recognize the ways harm can quietly shape everyday life. One thing that kind of comes to mind to me is like, we're always in the routine of like, especially if there's folks listening who have kids, you pick them up, what's the next step? It's like, do they have activities, or do they have, you have to get dinner ready for them. But if possible, try to make time to just sit down, ask them about their day, play
Yeah.
with them, read to them. Once more, going back to that dialogue piece, getting outside of that structure or structural violence that we're trying to put a spotlight to right now. So recognize the ways harm can quietly shape everyday life. And so how can we pause and take a break from that, you know? So at the same time, this awareness invites the possibility. It reminds us that peace building is not only about resolving disputes, but about transforming systems, reimagining institutions, and working collectively toward a more just and equitable world. Um, because if we think that the system that's working for us is great, just reflect upon the fact that 100 years, people might have thought the same thing, but I
Yeah.
don't think we would be comfortable or happy with that system. So I always like to think about like 100 years from now, they would be so critical of the system that we're living in now. It'd be like, oh my, talk about the oppression that people were living under, just blind. So, how do we awaken ourselves? I guess, you know, while these challenges can feel overwhelming, they can also open the door for intentional change and meaningful action. So, what we've heard today calls us not only to reflect, but to engage, to ask questions, to participate in dialogue, to consider the role each of us can play in addressing inequities in our own communities. Thank you for sharing your insights today, your research, your perspective with us today. Your work is a powerful reminder that awareness is the first step toward change and that change is possible. And I just want to let you know you're always welcome to come back and have further conversation. I feel like we can just keep going. So
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you to our listeners. Thank you for joining us in Peace Building Initiatives in this conversation. If this conversation resonated with you, we encourage you to share with others and continue exploring how we can build more peaceful and just communities together. So until next time, take care and keep having conversation, keep those conversations going. Thank
Yes.
you again.